Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming. I'm so happy to see so many realtors interested in what we do. The way I see it is you guys are our boots on the ground. And if you understand our process, you can help explain it to our residents and your families and your friends. Maybe some of you will even want to reach out to your clients before the big revals start, the impact notices, which we'll go through and show some samples of. We'll be going out hopefully the beginning of March, and that's when people will start calling you, calling us, and they'll have questions. So the more you know about it, the more you can help them. So if you don't mind just holding questions off until the very end, we have 4 of us that are going to do little presentations for you. So the first person is Gary Drake from New York's Office of Real Property, and he's going to talk to you about the equalization rate.
Hi, as Janine said, I'm Gary Drake. I'm the Regional Director for New York State Office of Real Property Tax Services. We have a regional office in Batavia. We cover 15 counties in western New York. And what our agency does ultimately is we set the equalization rate for every town in New York State. You know, out of Batavia, we do those 15 counties. We set the equalization rates. And in a nutshell, what the equalization rate is just a comparison of the town's assessed values to what the market value is in that town. So the assessed values divided by the market value gives us a rate. And the way we do that, we do it several different ways, but our preferred method is if a town does a reassessment, we can just monitor that reassessment and be able to check off some boxes at the end that they did this, that's statistically it looks good, it looks uniform, and then we can just give them an equalization rate of 100%. And it's a lot less labor intensive for us. So with that, let me go. So I'm Gary Drake. I've worked for the Office of Real Property Tax Services for 32 years. The majority of my career I spent, out in the field actually working with reassessment towns. So I think the first reassessment I ever worked on was in Victor back in 1996. So I've been doing it a little while. So that slides here. What is a reassessment? As far as the state's concerned, well, the legal definition is, I'll read it off there, but a reassessment is a systematic review of all locally assessed parcels to assure that all assessments are at a stated uniform percentage value as of the valuation date of the assessment roll upon which the assessments appear. And that's section 102 of the Real Property Tax Law. But, okay, what does that mean? The assessments of all property are reset to current market value on a given assessment roll. So the assessment roll we're talking about with Brighton, Henrietta, and Rush is obviously the 2025 assessment roll. The tentative roll is May 1. The final roll is July 1. And below there, these terms we use synonymously. So if you hear someone say reassessment, revaluation, or update project, we're talking about the same thing. But okay, so really, what does a reassessment mean? Basically, what the assessors are going to do this year is reappraise every property in their towns. Now, it's not a bank appraisal. It's not a fee appraisal. If they had to do that, they would never get done, right? Henrietta is 16,000 parcels. They don't have time to do a fee appraisal. What they do is a computer-assisted mass appraisal. They use a computer system to generate appraisal documents, but then they review the values that the computer comes up with. They don't blindly accept them. They go through and review those to make sure they make sense for each property. And they make changes where they need to. And by doing it that way, they can finish the project in a timely fashion. Obviously, if they had to do a fee appraisal for every one of those parcels, it would be, it would take probably over a year to do, and they would be out of date by the time they were finished. So the only other thing I'll point out in that legal, it says locally assessed parcels. Most parcels are locally assessed. The only exception is what we call Roll Section 5, is special franchise parcels. So that's poles, wires, cables that run into public right-of-way. By law, New York State assesses those, and we provide the towns with those values every year. So a reassessment year is no different. Yeah. So I think that's. And then a stated uniform percentage of value. I just want to touch on that. New York State is unlike most other states, as you know. In New York State, there's no, the only law in New York State is the assessments have to be uniform. The towns can assess at any percentage of value they want as long as those values are uniform. But we feel, and we like to encourage towns to reassess, because when the values are at 100% of market value, it's just easier to understand for everyone. So, and there's not a lot of towns, if you go out there and look, you'll see towns that are at, their assessments are 50% of value. They're at, I got some towns I deal with in the southern tier, their values are like 2% of value. Generally, when you see places like that, they didn't get there on purpose. They got there through neglect, and those assessments probably aren't uniform. So if you don't do something every so often, periodically, inequities are going to creep into your roll, and you won't be uniform. So with that, let me go, what a reassessment, what it does. And I'm going to touch on a few things here, but the number one reason, really to me, the only reason to do a reassessment is for equity within the roll. Like I said, if you don't reassess property periodically, inequities creep in. Certain property, will appreciate faster than others. And you guys know, you see sales, you know what drives value. But, the easy thing to see, although Henrietta, Brighton, Rush don't have any waterfront, the region I work in, we have a lot of waterfront, Finger Lakes, Great Lakes. People pay a premium to be on the water. Those waterfront properties appreciate faster than other properties do. School districts can make a difference. If you're in a town, School District A provides all sorts of AP classes and languages and has great sports facilities. People with kids want to be in that district, so they'll pay a little bit more money to be in that district. So those things make certain properties appreciate faster than others. And if you don't reassess periodically, those inequities creep into your roll. So that first point is, to me, the real reason, the only reason to do the reassessment is to realize, hey, my roll is becoming inequitable. I haven't done anything in a few years. I want to smooth out those inequities. One of the big ones, 32 years of doing this, it's funny, but ranch houses appreciate faster than colonials and old styles. Why? Is it because people are aging, they don't want to deal with stairs? I don't know, but I do know, looking at statistics, they will appreciate in value quicker. So, the other things that reassessment does, it provides transparency, increased taxpayer confidence, understanding of the system. It's far easier for taxpayers to understand market value assessments. When STAR legislation passed, it was in 1997, 98, around there was another part of STAR. It was called the Taxpayer Bill of Rights. That mandated that the full market value appear on tax bills. So not only do you have an assessment on your tax bill, you have this thing called the full market value. Well, when those are the same, when your assessment is the market value, it makes it a lot easier for the taxpayers. You know, I don't know how many times I've been in an assessor's office over years and the phone will ring and it's a taxpayer saying, hey, you raised my assessment, you didn't notify me. And the assessor says, no, I didn't. But it's because the taxpayer is looking at their tax bill and they're seeing that full market value changed from the year prior. Not their assessment, their full market value. And that's because the town hasn't done anything. The level of assessment equalization rate has dropped. The full market value has gone up. So it's a lot easier. It just makes it easier for the taxpayers to understand when the assessments are at the market value. So it's another reason we promote reassessments. Reassessment should be tax neutral, absent other budget increases. The total tax raise should be unchanged. I've got another slide here in a minute. I'll touch on that, but well, I'll touch on it in a second. And then reduced litigation reassessments generally. It's not, hasn't been as big in this part of the state, but downstate they see a lot where places are at fractional assessments, particularly big commercial properties and companies will take towns to court based on what percentage of their value they're at. They'll use it to make an argument in court that, hey, the town's supposed to be at 80% of value, but we feel you've got our commercial property at 84% of value. We're going to take you to court over that. So again, it tends to lessen those tax certiorari lawsuits when you're at 100%. So again, reassessment, what it does, equalization rate, you get as long as the reassessment is conducted in what we feel is a correct, proper manner, as long as it's met. We use IAAO standards. As long as the town has met those standards, we will just sign off on it and say, yes, you're at 100% equalization rate. You know, we do some statistical analysis to make sure we agree they're 100%. And, you know, we monitor that. And we have a good working relationship, I would say, with our towns. And if we need to see some documents out of the reassessment, they don't have any problem sharing those with us. So it makes it easier, again, for us. It makes it easier for the town at that equalization rate time. And then, oh, I didn't advance. The other part is state aid. No town has ever done a reassessment because they're going to get some state aid. But at the end, again, if we feel it was a good reassessment, everything was correct, we do provide some state aid. It's not a lot of money. It certainly doesn't offset the entire cost of the reval. But we do provide some state aid. It can be up to $5 a parcel, but it's all budget dependent for us, how much money we have is allotted to us for state aid, and that can change budget year to budget year. And it also depends on how many parcels are eligible statewide. We just divvy that money up by eligible parcels statewide. And again, my point here to stress, you know, regular reassessment at market value is the only way that all taxpayers pay only their fair share. Again, it's the equity. That's the reason to do a reassessment, is equity in your role. Okay, what a reassessment does not do. Contrary to popular belief, it doesn't generate additional tax revenue. And people say, well, what do you mean you raised all the assessments town-wide, you raised the 50%. How could you not, of course the town's gonna get additional revenue. No, the revenue to the town is based on the levy. And one of you two have a discussion of levy later, but as long as that levy stays about the same, the tax rate will come down and the money collected by the town should remain the same. This has gotten a lot better in my career since the 2% tax cap. That's kind of reined towns in on the amount they can increase the levy in any given year. I mean, towns, county schools can exceed the cap, but it's a more difficult process to do so. Again, what it doesn't do, prevent tax shifts. Well, we were talking about inequities. If you have inequities in your role, reassessment is going to iron out those inequities. There will be tax shifts within the town. We know as in the as-is state, some people are paying too much. They're over-assessed relative to the others. And some people are paying too little. They're under-assessed relative. Well, we're going to iron that out. There will be some shifting of tax burden within the parcels in the town. And lastly, it doesn't compensate taxpayers for prior inequities. Each roll year stands on its own. Every taxpayer has the right to grieve their assessment every year, whether there's a reassessment or not. So there will be people, there are smart people out there that will understand after this reassessment that, hey, I was overassessed relative to the other properties previously, and I pay too much in taxes the last few years. They can't go back. They can't grieve prior years. You get the opportunity each and every year to grieve. If you don't take advantage of that, there's no going back to try and recoup that overpayment. So I think that's what I wanted to touch on from my standpoint. But I don't know. Do you want to wait till the end for questions? Or you want me to? All right. But
Hi, it's me again, Janine Whitaker. I'm the assessor at the town of Brighton. I'm going to go over some important dates in the assessment calendar. Most jurisdictions follow this calendar except for the city of Rochester within Monroe County. And if you're outside Monroe County, I don't know, but most of them will probably follow it though. March 1st is taxable status date, and it's the last day to turn in exemptions. That is the same date every year. Taxable status date is the condition that a property, a residence, a business is in on that date, on March 1st. For example, I had a rental home that burnt down, not all the way down, but close, on December of 23. I went to the assessor and she came and saw it, and it was, she brought the assessment down because it wasn't livable. Because it was like that before March 1st. So I had a tax break for a year. And now it's built back up. So on March 1st of this year, it goes back up to where it should be. So if you have a fire, have it before March 1st. Early March, you'll be, your residents, or our residents will be getting their impact notices. There'll be some samples in the next couple pages. That only happens in a reveal year. So because we're doing total town reveals, we have to send out impact notices to every property. Mid-March to mid-April, we'll be holding informal grievances. As soon as they get their impact notices, they could call and schedule an informal meeting with the town. We'll have directions on the back of the impact notice of all the steps they can take, the informal, the formal grievance, and a little bit about SCAR. And then on May 1st, the tentative roll is published. So anything that happened in mid-March and April in the informals will be reflected on this tentative roll. If people are still not happy with their assessments, then there's another process which we'll go over all the steps later.
Can I ask a question? I'm so sorry. I won't be able to follow if I don't get an answer. So
Okay.
mid-March to mid-April for the reevaluation year, the reevaluation year doesn't happen every year.
No,
The reevaluation is when everybody's touched.
everybody.
So that mid-March to mid-April isn't every year.
No, it's only in a reveal year.
Got it.
Yep. So May 1st is tentative roll. That's the first day people can turn in formal grievance applications. And not a day before that. That's the first day, and they can only turn them in up until the fourth Tuesday in May. That's every year, the fourth Tuesday in May. The date changes, the number changes. This year it's the 27th. At 8 p.m. And then it's shut down. There's no more grievances that can be turned in. You do not have to do an informal to do a formal grievance. You do have to do a formal grievance to do a SCAR hearing, but we'll get to that later. Oh, it's on the bottom. Okay, July 1st of the current year is when the final roll is published. That will reflect any changes that happened during the grievance process. And if they are still not happy with that number, they can go on to the small claims assessment review. We call it SCAR. July 1st of the previous year is called the valuation date. That is the date that we look at. We try to bring properties to the date that it was valued at on July 1st of the previous year. So when we do this, I'm sorry about that, that's my pointer. When we do this, this reval, we're gonna be looking at July 1st of 2024. So for you guys, and it's a little bit different than what you do, because when you look for comps, you look for the most recent, within the last 3 months. We want it to be valued back a year ago. So we do something called trending, which we can trend up to July 1st, or we can trend back to July 1st, but it gets a little complicated. So you're best off if you're gonna help your resident, or your customers looking for houses that sold that are similar to theirs around the July 1st date. You won't always be able to find any, so you can use any date, but people will come in and be like, well, this just sold last week, and it was, we're not looking at last week, we're looking at last year, so it can get a little confusing. And then, like I said, they don't have to do an informal, but they do have to do a formal grievance to do a SCAR, but it has to be on their primary residence. Why do we need to reassess properties now? If you can see, since July 1st of 2018, Brighton has trended 54%. Our market has gone up 54%. Just since July 1st of 2023, we're already up 11%. And then if you look at Henrietta, they've gone up 63% since 2018. And we both did our reveal, the last reveal in 2018, right? And Henrietta was 2018? You don't know? Oh, never mind. Brighton did one in 2018. And then they're up 7% since July, so just in, 8 months.
decide when you're gonna do the whole town? Is it like every 5 years, 7 years, when?
Well, we've signed up for a cyclical cycle, and we're going to do every 4 years.
Okay,
But people, when they're so it's been since 2018, so now we're at 5, 6, 7 years.
Yeah.
And I'll see in one of the slides how the equalization rate keeps dropping because the market keeps going up.
great, yeah.
And here it is. So this MTA trend since 2000, we're down to here. So we did a reval in 2008 and a reval in 2018, and you can see the equalization rate on the opposite side went back up to 100. Didn't get too bad in between those two revals because our trending was only -1, -3. Then we did a reval in 2018 as it started to slip down to 89 equalization rate. So we did another reval, came up to 100%. Now with these last 3 years, the 5, 8, 15, 12 trend, we can't keep up. So our rate went down to 65, our equalization rate in Brighton. I don't have Henrietta's numbers. This is just another look. This is Henrietta's equalization rate. They managed to stay at 100% for a long time, and Amy could probably speak to how they did that, but Brighton did not. So what makes up the assessment? You guys know this already. It's the market value of the land, the real property, and that equals the assessed value. And you know the definition, you learned this in Real Estate 101. The most probable sale price in a competitive open market between willing and knowledgeable buyer and seller made without duress to either party. How do the assessors determine the market value? Well, the real estate market drives the market value and we reflect it. So we're using comparable sales, valid sales. We're not using, nowadays the market's so hot that we can use estates that have been listed on the market and they're selling just like everything else. But they have to be listed on the open market, on the MLS, to be a valid sale. And like Gary touched on the modeling, we have a system that models and helps us pick comps. And it's a mass valuation, like he talked about. We're not doing an appraisal on each home. What makes a property comparable? You guys know this also. Location, style, size, age. Keep in mind the valuation date, to go back a little bit, but when someone asks for your help, act like you're gonna list it. Tell them the price that it's worth. Don't skip over their neighbor's house because it's too high and jump over into another school district or town because that's the price or the assessed value that they want. We kind of know that trick. So in Irondequoit, Amy and I both worked in Irondequoit in 2023, and we did a town reval. So these are some samples from that, just because I had access to them. The average assessed value went up at about 45% during that reval, which sounds huge, right? People were like, oh my God, 45%? At 45%, well, this one's 44%. This is what an impact notice looks like. But at 44%, their taxes went up $43, which is over 12 months. So I'm not doing math up here, but you can. This next one, it went up 37%, and their taxes went down $461. So people are going to see these notices. They're going to look at the top. They're going to go, I can't sell my house for this much. No, it's too much. Look at the bottom. They might have gone down. People would call and be like, and I'd be like, did your taxes go up? Well, no. Well, now you have more equity in your house. And this one went up 51%, and their taxes went up $463, similar to what Gary was saying. Like, there's going to be a shift. There's people who have been underassessed for a while, and they've been getting a deal. So, you're welcome. So the information that will be on the notice, they'll have the parcel, the owner data, any exemptions that they have. Estimated county, town, and school taxes based on the 2024 tax rates and levy. Because the 2025 budgets haven't been done yet. We don't know what the rates are gonna be, so we have to just do a hypothetical based on what we knew this past year. And it'll show the approximate change in their taxes based on the levies staying at level, that, what they were last year. And it'll have information about the grievance process. What's not on the notice is the percent increase. So there's a little example of how you can figure it out. You take the net change and divide it by last year's assessment, and that'll give you the percent that it changed. Everybody's will be in a plus. No, nobody will probably see a negative change. It'll all be positive, so. So there's a little example there for you. It went up 6%. It doesn't have the estimated taxes for county services, like fire districts or special districts. Those, we don't know what those will be. Like in Arundecoit, there were 5 different fire districts. Some of them went up a ton. People come in and be like, why are my taxes, this isn't what your estimate said. Because, I don't know, one of the fire districts took a big jump. So, it doesn't have budget information that will be used to determine the tax levies for 2025, 2026 school tax bill, or the 26 town and county tax bill. How does the assessment impact taxes? So the assessed value is one part of the equation. The assessed value divided by 1,000 times the tax rate equals your taxes. So 2024, the tax rate in Brighton, in the Brighton School District, was $48.07. When a reassessment's done, rates will typically fall, depending on the levy for next year. But for example, it'll be on the next slide, but in 2018, the Reeville and Brighton, going from 89 equalization rate to 100, the tax rate dropped by $4.79. We're currently at 65, so to jump up to 100, I'm guessing, I don't know for sure, but I'm thinking the tax rate will go down a bit. Here's the arrows point to how in 2018, how they changed. And I wrote it over there. So it went from 48, in 2017, it went from 48.17 to 42.94, so it dropped $5. But like I said, I'm thinking it's gonna drop more this go around because we're doing 35%, or 35 change from 65 to 100%, where they only did 11 in 2018, so. I think that's it for me, right? Oh, so Amy will be next. She's the assessor in Henrietta and Rush, and she was the assessor in Arundecoit before that. Do you want the pointer? I don't need a pointer. Okay.
Thanks, Janine. Hi, everybody. As Janine said, I'm Amy Yorstein, I'm the assessor in the towns of Henrietta and Rush. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the levy. So hopefully you all know what it is, but maybe you don't. What is the levy? So the levy is how much money the taxing jurisdictions need to raise with taxes. How do they figure that out? Well, they figure out what are their expenses. They figure out how much money they're going to have coming in. Ways that they offset expenses are fees, for permits, dog licenses, they're renting out cabins, or, that sort of thing is the revenue. Sewer revenue, consolidated drain revenue. All that revenue is subtracted from the expenses, and then what's left is the levy. That's how much money needs to be raised through taxes. The levy for each taxing jurisdiction is located on the tax bill. There's a full-size, we're going to see a tax bill in a minute, but there is a full-size tax bill at the end of the packet. If you've never looked at one closely, you'll be able to see where exactly the levy is located on the tax bill. And you can compare your own tax bills year over year and look to see how much has the levy changed from the previous year. This is telling you, you know, what is happening within the taxing jurisdiction during their budgeting process. How much more money do they need this year than they needed last year? This is also why when assessments don't change, taxes change, because the amount of money that needs to be collected is changing. So if your assessment stays the same year over year, but you're paying more in taxes, that means the levy went up. Your portion of the pie is still the same, but the levy changed, so the amount of money that has to be collected has increased, or decreased, but increased, let's be honest. Property taxes in New York State support school districts, local governments, special districts, and other local services. All the money that's collected through property taxes in New York State goes to, you know, basically fund the things that are happening in the town. The money's not going to the state of New York. Forgot the clicker. How much money is going where? This is a dollar bill, little example for the town of Brighton that shows, based on their tax rates, what percentages of the taxes that are being collected are going to whom. And the way it looks right now is 62% of the money being collected is going to the school district. 18% is going to the county. 7% is going to the fire and ambulance. And 13% is going to the town. Now this varies town to town. We have towns in this county that have police departments. Their town bills are a little bit bigger. You know, so that can vary, but in all towns, the school is the biggest component of that. And we're happy to educate all the children. So as I said, there's a full-size example of this in the back of the packet. But the levy is located right here. It's smack in the middle of the tax bill. It shows the amount of each taxing jurisdiction's levy, gives you the total levy. Then right to the right of where the levy is, it's going to show you the percentage that it changed from the previous year. That little column. I think most of you are probably familiar with the tax bill. Special districts are all listed on the bottom. This is the town and county bill, by the way. Here's a school bill. Same deal. There's a big one in the back. Just if you've never, I guess I'll point out the equalization rate if you've never noticed it. I'm going to go back to the town and county bill. In that upper right-hand corner is where it says the full market value number and the assessed value number. In this case, they're different, and directly under that, it tells you what the equalization rate is also. It's at 70% on this bill. So same thing for the school bill, it's also giving you that same information. So this was touched on earlier, but this is kind of just another representation of what's the reassessment project timeline. Impact notices are coming out in March. All the informal hearings have to take place in March and April, so there's not a lot of time to get that all done. Before that tentative roll has to be published, every single person who wants to have an informal has to be heard, and we have to make determinations on all of those informal reviews that take place, and we have to be able to update the information so that our tentative rolls can be published on May 1st, so it's a lot of work in between that time. May 1st, change notices are going to go out, so the change notices, That's the difference between the preliminary notice, your impact notice, that notice has a lot of names. If there's a change between the preliminary, the impact notice, and the tentative roll, we will send another notice to the taxpayers, letting them know. If there's not a change, they're not going to get a notice. I know at least that's how Janine and I do it. Other towns may do it differently. They may send notices to everybody, but for us, we're only sending notices to people that are changing. But everybody can look up their new assessment on the tentative assessment roll. They can call their assessor's office and find out what's my tentative assessment on May 1st, please. Not before May 1st, though. They can look it up online. All of our rolls have to be published on our websites. They can come in and look at it. Normally, we have a roll available for people to look at. Starting May 1st, they can submit their formal grievances, like Janine said, through 8 p.m. on May 27th. 8 p.m. is the deadline. 8:01, the doors are locked. The lockbox is locked. It's not here on time. It won't be heard by the bar. But everything that comes in on time will be heard by the bar. We have hearings for as long as we need to get those all heard. The hearings will start on May 27th, and they'll go until we're finished. Final roll, July 1st, and we'll send out determination letters. Everybody gets a determination letter if they filed a grievance, whether that changed or not. So, first stop for the property owner who's not happy with the impact notice is going to be that informal. The letter is going to tell them what they need to do. They're going to need to call or schedule an appointment. What do they need to bring? What should they bring? Well, evidence of what they think their house is worth, why they think it's not worth what we think it's worth. That could look like comparables, valid comparables. We supply sales books. Those are online. They're going to be available when the notices go out. They can look up their own sales. In Henrietta, we separate them by style. They can go and look, figure out, okay, I see this house is on my neighbor's street. I see this house is on my street. I think these are more comparable. I'm going to bring these in. They can get an appraisal done. That's a great evidence. They can take pictures of deferred maintenance in their house. They can bring estimates for repairs of that deferred maintenance, showing us that these are things, I need a new roof, it's going to cost me, $15,000. I need new windows, it's going to cost me this. Now, we're not taking, if you need a new roof and it's going to cost $15,000, we're not taking $15,000 off the assessment, because everybody knows it's not a dollar for dollar exchange. But it is something that we will take into consideration. You can bring in a CMA. That's helpful as well.
Are these sales books online for all towns?
I believe so, but maybe not. I know that a lot of places in Monroe County do, and certainly we did in Irondequoit, and we will in the town of Rush as well. As I said, tentative roll is going to be published. Already talked about that. What they can do if they don't know, they can call us. All the grievances filed by the deadline will be heard by the Board of Assessment Review. I'm going to turn it over to Amy Grandy for a few minutes, and she's going to talk a little bit about the Board of Assessment Review and some other good stuff.
Hi, how you doing? Good. My name is Amy Grandy, and I'm the Director of Real Property for Monroe County, and one of the ways that I help is I help to train the Board of Assessment Review members. I find that a lot of times what is most important is education and people working through things together. A lot of times a home is someone's most cherished thing that they've ever invested in, and they need to have an understanding And if they don't feel heard, if they go to an informal, and if they're still not satisfied with what is happening, they need to know that they can go to a board of professionals and state their information, and that they can be heard and relied upon for you guys. So if a taxpayer, this is what I just said, if a taxpayer believes their assessment is too high, they may first discuss it with the assessment office, and then there's an administrative procedure for assessment complaints. They file a 524 form for a Board of Assessment review. And that would be a judicial, it's a quasi-judicial, I have notes. It's a quasi-judicial process. And the board is established by each town. They go before the town, they get approved by the town, and then they are adopted and attend my famous training. And they can sit on the Board of Assessment review and hear the grievance processes. So essentially, what would a valuable member of the Board of Assessment review have? They would exercise sound judgment, be impartial, be objective, and state the reason for making their determinations. They're appointed, like I had said previously, they're appointed by the town, and it's composed of 3 to 5 members, and usually it rotates up. Not usually, it does rotate out. So the permanent board members, each one is assigned a 5-year term, and as the terms end, you just keep re-upping every 5 years, ideally. Do you see how I'm kind of just re-up every 5 years? There's also temporary members, and sometimes the boards will have temporary members for a reval year, and they come and they can learn about the process and see if it's something that they're interested in exploring any further. And that's probably something that each of your towns is going to be participating in. And this is my sales pitch to you as residential brokers and the community that would be able to help in this process. If you know of anyone that you're working with, if anyone is working through training, if they want more exposure to the market, this is a great way for them to help contribute to the process. Quasi-judicial, sound temperament, provide a fair hearing, safeguard due process of law. Oh, I'm done already, but really. Okay, so what would be a good Board of Assessment review member? You're going to have knowledge of property sales. Each one of you has that. You would need to be 18 years old, a U.S. citizen, and a resident of the municipality that you're serving, because those are the people that are going to have the most knowledge of the market that they're serving. And you would file an oath of office and sit on the board for a few weeks and listen to the residents and help them work through this process. Thank you.
I realize I skipped over something I was supposed to talk about. So what does the grievance process looks like? If you've never been to a grievance, I mean, how we do it in Henrietta is in our boardroom where we normally have our board meetings. The Board of Assessment Review kind of sits up at the table. I sit at a table off to the side, and then the residents have a table where they can sit. You know, they sort of file in all the grievances. When they get an appointment, they're given the next available appointment, given a date and a time to basically show up and make their pitch to the board. It can be a little intimidating for people who have never gone through the process before, people who don't know that much about property values, so it can be a little nerve-wracking. We try to make it as comfortable as possible, but it's, you know, it's a little difficult. Anyway, basically, the grievance hearings are 15 minutes long. The residents have 5 minutes to make their pitch. I have 5 minutes to make my pitch, and then the Board of Assessment Review has 5 minutes to sort of ask some questions if they have any questions. And then that's it. We have to hear a lot of grievances in a reval, so there's not a whole lot of time for a big presentation. We do ask people when they come to be prepared, so that, you know, everybody can be heard in a timely manner, and we're not running an hour behind by the end of the day when we're listening to all of these, or when the board's listening to all of these. I skipped over that part. Okay, the assessment roll is finalized on July 1st. So basically, we have to hear all of the grievances. And I know that in Arundecoit, we had, when we did our reval that Janine and I worked on together, we had 999 grievances filed. 999. If you figure out how many hours 15 minutes for 999 is, it's a lot of hours. So actually, the sooner people file their grievances after May 1st, the sooner we can start looking at grievances. So we actually stipulated a third of our grievances. Stipulation means we looked at the evidence that the people brought and we said, geez, we made a mistake on this one. We should probably lower this some. We contact the resident, we say, hey, we think we made a mistake. How do you feel about this number? They can say yes, or they can say no. No, I want to continue to have my grievance in front of the board, okay, or they can say yes, and we can stipulate. There's a page on the form where we can stipulate a grievance. Basically, that means that they agree to a number, we both agree, we both sign, their grievance is done. It'll be ratified by the Board of Assessment Review, but it doesn't actually have to go to a hearing. We don't want people who need to have their assessments reduced if we made a mistake. We don't want them to have to come before the Board of Assessment Review. It's more time I'm hearing grievances. It's more stressful for the people. If we can do it ahead of time, we certainly will. But the closer we get to grievance day, the less likely we are to be able to hear those grievances, to actually review those grievances ahead of time. So the sooner people can file their grievances, right after May 1st, the more chance there is that it's going to be looked at ahead of time and might get stipulated if we in fact made a mistake, which it's mass appraisal, we make mistakes. And we also don't know what, we can't see the inside of people's homes. If they have deferred maintenance that's on the inside that isn't showing on the outside, we don't know. And that's why we have the process for people to come and tell us what's up. Okay, so all those grievances have to be heard May 27th through whenever that roll has to be filed July 1st. So you can imagine how many hours we're hearing grievances. Because they all have to be heard and the determination letters all the determinations have to be made by the bar, and we have to have those all in the computer in order to file that roll on July 1st. I'm just going to say this again, you must file a formal grievance in order to go to a SCAR hearing. So if people come to the informal and they're not happy and then they don't file a grievance, they have no other recourse. If they don't come to the informal, if they miss it, if their dog eats the notice, they can come file a grievance. If people aren't happy after the grievance, when they get their determination letter July 1st, that small claims assessment review is available. Okay, I'm going to switch gears here and talk about something that you guys probably, as you're handling real estate transactions, are having to deal with. Maybe you don't know about it, maybe you do, re-levies. So when properties have exemptions, there's a certain portion of the taxes that are not being paid by that resident because they have an exemption. So if they have let's call it a veteran's exemption, their assessed value is being reduced and they're paying less in taxes. If somebody buys that home and they're not a veteran, they're not entitled to that tax break. So those taxes that were not paid have to be paid. They will be re-levied on the next possible tax bill, whatever the difference is. A lot of times this takes people by surprise. They don't understand that they're going to see these reduced taxes on the next bill, or depending on the timing. We put them on there as soon as we can, but it's not always the very next bill. STAR is the only exemption that does not get re-levied. Enhanced STAR won't be re-levied. If somebody who isn't eligible for Enhanced STAR buys a house, if they're only eligible for Basic STAR, they just get to have that benefit. But all the other exemptions will be re-levied. Property owners, one of the things that's important, Property owners need to communicate with their mortgage company if they have their taxes escrowed, because their next tax bill is going to be artificially high with a re-levy on there. And what a computer is going to do is it's going to see that amount of money and it's going to say, wow, these taxes really went up. We need to collect this shortage. And we need to collect more moving forward because of how high these taxes are now. So people will get their mortgages, will get adjusted and they're like, oh my gosh, because the bank is collecting the shortage 2 times. They think the taxes have gone up to that artificially high amount because of that re-levy. But people can communicate with their mortgage companies, show them the tax bill. This is a one-time re-levy. The actual taxes are X. And normally, I would hope a mortgage company would take that into consideration, especially if they have something from the town stating how much the re-levy is. Exemptions are paid back based on the date of death in the situation where there is a death or the date of sale. The date of sale is the deed date, just so you know. We use the deed date. Doesn't matter when it was filed at the county, doesn't matter when you got the keys. If it's not the same as the deed date, that's the date we're using. I run into that a lot, where the deed date is different from when the people are actually taking possession of the home. And it makes a difference when you're talking about a re-levy, especially if it's a big one, especially if it's a month difference between the deed date and when they're actually purchasing the home. Some resources. Now, just a little information about how assessors use MLS data. I'm guessing there are probably assessors that don't have access to MLS data, but we do purchase the MLS in Henrietta so that we can review listing information. We're using your information. We're using your pictures. We're verifying our inventory based on the information that is in your listing information. We're using the pictures to verify that information. If a house says it has 3 bathrooms, they finished off the basement, we didn't know about it. We see a picture of the finished off basement, we can count 3 pictures of 3 bathrooms. We're changing our inventory based on that information. It's a tool that we can use to help us be more accurate in our inventory and making sure that there's equity in the roll and people are paying based on what their property has. Sometimes we're reading disclosure documents to find out if there's anything going on with the property. I personally use information, sales information and listing information, just to kind of get market information. What are the trends? What's happening? Is it the same as what I can see in my sales that I have in my computer database as well?
You're like detectives.
We are like detectives. Your pictures are very helpful. We can follow along through the house and find out what's going on. Sometimes we can even figure out if things have been added or subtracted. I also use the MLS to find sales for unique properties. So if I have to go outside my market in the town of Rush, we have a lot of different kinds of properties, and sometimes I have an 8,000 square foot house. I don't have a lot of 8,000 square foot houses in Rush, so I had to go to the MLS to find some others in Monroe County that were comparable to try to come up with an assessed value and a market value for that property. So that's also how I'm using MLS information. And sometimes if you just want to search by the things that you can search for in the MLS, it's a little easier sometimes than going through our special reports. How could you help? How did I get this slide? You can find out what towns are doing revals. You can call up a town. You can listen to the news. Sometimes it's on the news. It hasn't hit that Henrietta's doing a reval yet, or Brighton, but I'm guessing once those impact notices hit mailboxes and people start calling the news and telling them how much their assessment changed, that's what happened in Arundecoit. That was a fun time. So listening to the news or just reaching out to towns to find out how often are you reassessing. I get that question every once in a while. You can reach out to your clients and help them understand the process and their options. We just explained them all to you. Be ahead of the game and notify your clients that you know of if there's going to be a reval in their town. They're going to be getting an impact notice. If you want to talk it through, I'm here for you. You can assist them in pulling comps. Okay, let's take a look and see. Pull a few comparables. What's the number? Is it similar to the number that's on that impact notice? It seems like the assessor got it right. If it's different, hey, maybe you have a case. Or maybe you're underassessed and you just want to tuck that away. You can represent them at the grievance hearing. So there is an area on the grievance form where people can designate anybody they want to go to a grievance hearing. They can designate you to go to their grievance hearing. They don't have to come. They can if they want to, but you can come and represent them as long as that's been identified on that grievance form. As I said, it can be intimidating, so they might want you to do it for them. A few more resources. Ooh. Okay, does anybody have any questions? Yes?
When you guys look at the town levy, how do you determine how much of the pie each town gets? Because a huge portion of the property tax is what we pay the county. So how do you determine what Arundecoit gets versus Henrietta versus Brighton, the actual piece of the pie?
Okay.
That's part of what Amy has to do with the county as the county director. She uses that's one of the uses, that equalization rate, where they will take each town, divide the total assessed value by the equalization rate to get a full market value. And then, okay, if Greece is 15% of the county based on that, then Greece will pay 15% of the county levy.
So that's what I'm saying. So how do you determine what percent of the county this is?
They
By
take-
size, by population?
Yeah, by the total assessed value, equalized assessed value, the market value in that town. That's how, and that's a big part of the county director's job, is to figure that out and
Figure a math
apportion that.
I love spreadsheets.
Yes, right here.
Can you repeat the levy and the mortgage part that you were talking about?
Sure, so the question is, can I repeat the levy and the mortgage information? So you're talking about the re-levy of exemptions?
You said you can call the mortgage.
Yeah. So normally when people have a re-levy, they might get something from the town that says, hi, there was an exemption on this property, you're going to have to pay back blank, this is going to be on the next tax bill. They can take that information and reach out to their mortgage company and provide that information to their mortgage company, so their mortgage company knows that if it's $4,000 that's going to be added to their town and county bill, that their town and county bill the following year is not going to be $4,000 higher. It's not going to have that $4,000 on it. They need to communicate that to the mortgage company.
Will that bill show what the actual taxes are and then what the levy is?
Yes.
If I've ran situations where it has happened and we've basically helped the client and call the bank, and all that they wanted was just the bill to show.
Sure.
Oh, yeah, I understand, thank you. And
Sure.
they adjusted it.
So the question was, is that re-levy amount going to be a separate line item on the tax bill? Yes, it is. Yes, it is. So they should be able to provide a copy of their tax bill to the mortgage company showing on there. that this is just a one-time charge. It doesn't really say it's a one-time charge, but that's what a re-levy is. It's a one-time charge.
Sometimes
Yes.
we'll see a re-levy if somebody doesn't pay their school tax, and it goes to.
Yep.
That's correct. So she said sometimes there's a re-levy when somebody doesn't pay their school taxes. That's correct. If you don't pay your school taxes, they will be re-levied on the town, on that following town and county bill, but that will say school re-levy.
Yep, and this is probably off topic, but at what point do you guys send those to a third party for collection? How far into the process?
So the question is, when does it get sent over to a third party if people aren't paying their taxes? I'm going to let Amy answer that.
That is a call that's, she wants me to stand up so they can see that it's me talking. So the finance director for the county works with Treasury and makes a determination each year. You'll see on the Monroe County portal, sometimes it'll say sold to a third-party vendor, ATF, Propel, something along that line, and that is a determination that is made by them. There's also a surplus, there's also an in-rem auction that is handled each year for people that haven't paid their taxes.
I saw a hand in the back.
Sorry, one more question about the re-levy.
Sure.
So you're talking about if somebody prepays the taxes at closing and they didn't prepay it enough, depending on the day, they may owe a portion of whatever that month's payment is.
No.
Okay.
I'm not talking about anything, the question, so you guys all heard the question, right? Okay. So I'm not talking about anything that gets handled at the closing. This can, between the buyer and the seller, it can be handled at the closing, but what I'm talking about is how much that re-levy is, that it's gonna be on the tax bill, just making your clients aware of it. But it can be handled, we can figure it out-ish ahead of time if we know the dates. We have had brokers call in advance. Lots of times, this happens with flippers, where the re-levy winds up on the new homeowner's bill, even because it's been turned over so quickly. So we will have the people who are handling the flipper sale to the new homeowners. They will call to find out what's the re-levy amount going to be, how much are we responsible for. So we do have people who call in advance to try to figure that out so that it can all be handled at closing. But a lot of times it's not, I feel like. Yes.
So say a buyer closes on a house and can the town immediately send a letter if the value is, much more than the assessed value, immediately send a letter increasing their assessed value for just that property? Or do they have to reassess the whole town?
When there's a sale, unless it's a reval year, the only thing an assessment should change based on would be a physical change to the property. So if I review a sale and I look at the listing information and I see that there's a bunch of changes that have happened from what my inventory says, and at the time of this sale, let's say they added a deck, they refinished the basement. I can add value, if it's not a reval year, I can add value for what is a deck and what is a basement rec, how much value does that add in the market to this property? I can add that to the assessed value for the next year. But I'm not going to say, if it's sold for $300,000 and I'm not doing a reassessment, next year the assessment's not going to be $300,000. If I am doing a reassessment though, it'll probably be close to that.
So what happens if there's a community where after a house closes, every new buyer gets just a letter and none of the other assessments in the community change? That happened to me in a different county. Every person who closed, just like a month later after closing, everybody gets a letter, and none of the other assessed values in the community have changed.
That's
Is
a
that
great
illegal?
question. I guess maybe Gary could answer that. I suppose.
Well, that is technically illegal in New York. We call it sales chasing or selective reassessment. But it's up to the individual taxpayer. They have to be aware and they have to go in and fight that and say, hey, look, you can't change me just because I sold. There isn't any agency that's checking that. The county's not going to check it. So it's up to the individual buyer to be aware and go in and contest that.
Well, when a buyer's buying, basically, okay, never mind.
So just one more second, I'm gonna just want to say something. There are towns that do pretty much reassess every year. That's how Henrietta was able to stay at 100% for 22 years before this year. Henrietta was at 100% equalization before this year for 22 years because they reassessed a number of properties every single year in order to keep their equalization rate. They did enough to keep the equalization rate at 100%. They were reassessing enough properties. This year I said, we're not doing this because I can't assess all these properties every single year because there's too much change in the market. It's just, it wears on you. So we did let it drop this year, but that is one way where everything's being updated every year, where you could see, there are towns that do reassessment every year. Yes.
So I feel like we're asking the same question, but just for an example for the re-levy, if I personally buy a house that had a VA credit, let's say the taxes for the VA was $4,000, and then they're gonna go up to $6,000 or something, am I automatically getting a bill for $2,000? And that's why I call the mortgage company, or I guess, and then from the next years, I'll pay the $6,000 going forward?
So you will get a bill that will have whatever the credit was. So whatever short taxes were, say it was $2,000, your next tax bill, if it was normally going to be $4,000, it's going to have an extra $2,000 on there. And then the next year, it's going to be back to $4,000 again. So you're paying back that $2,000 in the first year, and then it's going to go back to normal after that. Does that make sense? Yes. Okay, great.
Would it be prorated for the time that the buyer, right, so it's not the full two, right? Prorated for the time.
It's prorated based on the date of sale. So it's 2,000, I was just giving that as an example. It could be any number, but it is based exactly on the number of days that they didn't own, that they owned the property, that they actually got the credit that they weren't entitled to. It's a very specific formula. Yes?
How do you handle new construction when?
So new construction can be, it's basically assessed like any other property. We do use the cost approach though with a new construction, and/or what's the sale price. And in a market where you have a lot of new construction, you could use other sales of new construction to help you value that property. Yeah. So one thing that is important to notice is relevant to that taxable status date. So we have a lot of building in Henrietta. We're going out to those partially built houses around the taxable status date of March 1st to say, okay, what's the percentage of this house? How done is it? Is it 50% done? Is it 99% done? And then we're basing the assessment on the percentage that it's done as of March 1st. So they can have a partial assessment while the house is still under construction. It goes for commercial properties as well. If we have commercial property that's, in the process of adding whatever, I talk with the building department, I go out to these properties, I figure out, okay, what's the status of this change, and it's partially assessed. And then the next year, we have a way to flag those, and then the next year it's up to the full if they're done. Yes?
So on the new construction, if someone pulls a permit, let's say in November of the previous year of the taxable status date, is it assumed that it's based on the land value that the builder pulls the permit on for assessment purposes at that time?
So we're reassessing the land as it would probably, the land value, do you mean specifically?
For the assessment, yes.
So the land generally, prior to something being built on it, it is considered undeveloped. And then once it has something on it, it's considered a primary piece of land. The land will be reassessed along with, so the assessment is the total of the land value plus the improvements. So the land value will be the full land value. And then whatever improvements are done, that'll be added.
Thank you.
Does that make sense? Did I answer your question? Okay. Hold on, we got one right here.
I assume you're familiar with Tom Golisano's webpage, Tax My Property Fairly. I often refer people who want to grieve their assessment to that page, and I'm wondering, how accurate is it from your perspective in the grievance process?
I don't know. I have not investigated that. I do know about it, but I have not investigated that, so I don't know. Sorry. Yes.
Where, did you say, where are the exemptions for the property listed? Where could I, like, look up to see if there's a VA exemption?
So that's a good question. The question is, where can I find if a property has exemptions? So on the Monroe County portal, you can go look up a property and you can look up their tax bills. And, well, let me see if I can go back to the tax bill. They're located up at the top. That, where I just pointed, says exemptions. So they'll be listed right in there. You can also call the assessor's office and ask. Anybody else? Yes.
When you have exemptions, whether they're VA or senior exemptions, are those, and you talk about the levy, and obviously they're not paying a tax, so somebody's absorbing it.
Correct.
Does that stay within the town, or does that stay within the county? How does that get, the monies that are exempt, how do those get re-levied?
So the question is, when you have exempted properties, basically what happens to that tax money that isn't being collected? Well, it's being spread over the rest of the town. It's within the town. Yes. It's within the town. So if the town of Arundecoit has
19%.
right, 2,000 senior exemptions, you have a lot of other people paying that.
But that stays within the town, it's
Correct.
not a county.
Correct.
Okay, that's
Yeah, that's correct. Yes.
So as far as let's go back to the VA exemptions and the special exemptions and the levy and paying extra the following year with mortgage.
Yep.
Should the attorneys at closing see the tax bills and collect those taxes at closing to avoid the chaos?
Yes, but the chaos is still, the question is, should the attorneys be collecting those re-levy amounts essentially? Yes, but there's no way to pay that. Well, you don't know for sure how much it's going to be, but there's also no way for them to like pay it in advance. So the re-levy is going to happen anyway. You can't, there's no way to prepay that. It has to be paid by the next homeowner when the re-levy hits the bill. There's no way to, I have had people say, well, can I prepay for this so it doesn't go on the tax bill? Can't do that.
And that's when the attorney can escrow. But when we do our stuff, we do everything based on total true taxes. That's why the MLS has to show total true. And then you tell the buyers, don't spend this money, but you're gonna have to pay it. I'll set it aside, so when the bill comes due, you pay
Yes.
it.
Right, but at closing, what the attorney's job is to take the 1 year's worth of taxes, and I always tell people, you're paying the adjustment to the seller for taxes they've prepaid, and they may pay on a discounted star, so your refund to the seller is not gonna be the true taxes. Your refund to the seller is gonna be taxes they've already prepaid, which is a lot lower, right? So they were thinking they were getting a bonus
Well, they are.
for
On
that
Star.
year, but on
On
Star
Star,
they
it's not
are.
prepaid.
Right,
It's
on Star,
only on
it's only on VA.
veterans.
Correct.
That's
Correct.
part of educating the buyer.
Yep. Anybody else? Okay.
So if somebody is gonna grieve their taxes, okay?
Yep.
Um,
Well, they're grieving their assessment,
I'm sorry,
not their taxes. Thank you.
grieving their assessment. So, does a CMA carry more weight than, or does an appraisal carry more weight than a CMA?
Well done. The question is, does a CMA carry more weight than an appraisal or vice versa if somebody is grieving their assessment? And the answer is yes, a well-done appraisal would, in my mind, carry more weight. It just has more specific information, generally speaking. You know if they have to put on there whether they've actually inspected the property. A lot of times there are pictures. It's just more, better, best, you know what I mean? But it needs to be done by a good appraiser as well, so. We see a lot of bad appraisals, but
Also, there are different services out there that say,
That's
hey,
correct.
you don't have to pay me unless we win.
That's
Are
correct.
those, in your experience, are those a good thing for us to say to our client? Hey, this is not a bad thing. It's not a scam. It's something where it's really valid. Because that letter goes out blanket, especially around Irondequoit.
correct. You know, if people don't want to, if they want to pay for a service for somebody else to do that for them, you know, it's not the worst thing in the world, I guess. Is it the best thing in the world? No, because they could do it themselves for free, and they wouldn't have to pay 50% of what they save in taxes back over 2 years or whatever it is.
Okay, so is the service better than an appraiser? Because the service you only pay if they win, where the appraiser, they're forking out $450 for an appraiser.
Well, so I tell people, if you get an appraisal and your appraisal shows that it's your peace of mind with that appraisal, you understand what the value of your home is and whether your home is properly assessed or not. So you have to make that, people have to make that judgment for themselves. Do I want to pay somebody else to tell me how much my house is worth? Do I want to go try to do the research myself, which can be done, and we do help people do that by providing the information that we provide on sales. Or do they want to just leave it up to somebody else and pay for the service? I mean, that's really an individual, you know, it's an individual choice in my opinion. You know, when I had to have my property, when I had to reassess my own property in Irondequoit, I went out and got an appraisal from somebody that I didn't know, some appraiser that, you know, wasn't my friend. I said, come and tell me how much it's worth, because I don't want there to be any questions about how much I'm assessing my property for, because I was the assessor where I lived. That's difficult to navigate, so. Anybody else? Yes?
We were told as a bar member that the states did not require the bar members to validate CMAs, but if an appraiser came through with an appraisal, we had to validate the value of the property based on the appraiser's report and not a CMA from a realtor.
I don't know. Amy, you're the one who does the
I'm just trying to
training.
understand what you're saying. So basically, someone directed you to, I'm going to say, look at an appraisal more difficultly? Is that what I heard you saying?
No, carrying more weight. An appraisal would be valued as the
Because
market
it's-
value
yeah.
as compared to a realtor's CMA.
Well, your realtors, how do you guys feel about that? An appraiser, I'm an appraiser. So an appraiser has to do an estimate of market value, and they have to look at each and every one of those comps and make adjustments for all of those comps and estimate a market value. They're looking at absolutely everything. What are you doing when you create a CMA? Are you doing that? Or are you just doing a statistical average? Because that's how we got here in the first place.
But my question is, for grievance day, as a
Right.
bar member, we were informed not to actually throw out CMAs as not valid information to adjust and make the recommendation.
I don't know that I would recommend that.
I wouldn't either,
I don't know that I would
you know,
recommend that.
I wouldn't either. And as an
So a
assessor,
CMA could be used for
in my
grievance?
opinion, yes.
Okay.
I would certainly look at it,
But it's not going to be weighted the same as an appraisal.
correct?
Correct. Okay.
Correct. Anybody else?
How recent does the appraisal need to be if someone happened to get refinanced or whatever?
So in this market, pretty recent. I mean, sure, 3 months. I mean, I would even look at something that's a year old. I would be able to really use that, but also keep in mind that valuation date. So if people are going out and paying for an appraisal they should pay for an appraisal that is valued as of the valuation date. So if somebody's going to get an appraisal to grieve their 2025 assessment, they need to tell their appraiser, we need the valuation date to be July 1st of 2024. Yeah. Yep. Anybody else? Yes?
I just had a question. I had a client, I was showing a house in Pittsburgh last week, he was moving from Henrietta. He said he gets a tax break for being a senior citizen, is that? I didn't know about that. So they
Yes.
do, even in Pittsburgh, like if you're, you can get a
Yes.
enhanced, oh, that's Enhanced Star. Oh,
Well,
I
so
didn't know.
there's a couple, there's two different ones. There's two different exemptions for seniors. There's Enhanced Star, which is just on school taxes. They have to be 65, that's one qualification. The other qualification is they have to meet the income requirement. This year, it's 107,300, 800, 300, 107.3. It's adjusted gross, not including IRAs. So that's for the owners. The owners, if it's a husband and a wife, or the owners. The other exemption is for seniors who are 65 who have less income. So they have to meet a certain income requirement. In Henrietta, it's 58,400. If they're below 58,400, they can get an extra exemption on the town, the county, and possibly the school. But each jurisdiction sets their income limit, so they can vary. That's one thing that you can go and figure out. You can call the assessor, they'll be able to tell you, or you can go and look at a town's code and see what their limits are. They should be in there as well.
And it's one member that has to be 65 or both?
So it depends. If they're married, only one has to be 65. If they're not married, all the owners have to be 65 to get the Enhanced Star. Yep. Anybody else? All right, I think we're done. Thank you so much for coming. We appreciate it. I'd like to thank Amy and Gary for coming and being special guests.